Well, folks, I'm excited to be here with my friend Kacee Johnson. Kacee Johnson just finished a long stretch in a senior leadership position at CPA.com, where she was shaping the technology future of the profession as well as other areas of the profession through the AI CPA organization. And now she has founded an AI first foundation that is supporting and measuring the profession. We're going to tell you more about that at the very end of today's podcast. But there is probably no greater thought leader when it comes to technology and firms than Kacee Johnson. So, Kacee, thanks for being with us today.
Oh, Joe, thank you so much. I'm glad to be here.
Yep. So, Kacee, we could talk about your work at CPA.com, which I would love to do in a whole episode, including your accelerator program and so many innovations you did. But, the topic for today is specifically about AI. And I know that probably intersected your time at CPA.com toward maybe the last 20, 30% of the time you were there is about the time that emerged and you were navigating it there. And now you're consulting with AI developers and firms around their AI adoption, but you're also rewarding and recognizing firms that are AI forward in this foundation we're going to talk about in a minute. But I think we've set up to our listeners now, you know what you're talking about. So I'm just going to ask you, you're looking at a lot of firms out there. You worked with a lot of firms through the AI CPA and CPA.com, and you're consulting with a lot of firms. What surprises you most about where these firms are? And is there a gap between what you expected to see and what you're actually seeing?
Great question. So I would say that what I'm seeing is they are all viewing this as like an AI adoption moment, and they all think that they're behind. So they're getting like this FOMO, and that leads to a quick, I would call it kind of layering of tools on existing workflows. Um, the gap and what I'm getting excited about are these firms that are really thinking much bigger and seeing this as an operating model shift. They're stepping back. They're asking, well, if AI is going to be doing a big chunk of this work, what should the firm actually look like? What will people be doing in 18 months, 3 years? And this is where it's getting really interesting
All right,
because
so
the
that's really,
reality.
you just kind of layered out two different responses. One seems more reactionary, and the
Mhm.
other one seems more responsive. That's enlightening. So when people are reacting, and I guess the question I would ask is when they do react, is that necessarily a bad thing? I mean, if I react by quickly throwing on some widgets and gadgets to give me some efficiency gains, and then I go into long term strategy, is that the best of both worlds?
No, because well, first, when they are reactive, they're generally they've got this FOMO. They're moving very fast. They're not identifying the problems that they're trying to solve first, or the opportunities that they want to capitalize on. So, because of that, first you end up with disparate systems, disparate data. Things aren't operating at the true level of efficiency that they could be, and they're, let's be honest, most of them are chasing efficiency gains. And then they still have that broken business model that probably is focused on time, billed by time, talent is rewarded by time. And I mean, AI is collapsing time. So to me, we just need to pump the brakes, slow down a bit, and get behind the strategy
Let it be
before.
transformative and not just
Right,
enable our current state. Yeah,
right,
that's super smart.
exactly.
Yeah, and I really
And when
like what you said about. Go ahead.
sorry, I was just going to say, when I say this, I mean, I hate to use generalizations, but think about this as a bell curve. So the majority is what I'm talking about here. In the middle, you've got the laggards behind that are just overwhelmed and not doing anything. They've got analysis paralysis, right? And then you've got on that other side the ones that I was talking about that are thinking much bigger, and they're completely changing their operating model. And they're looking at it in a more holistic sense.
In a more holistic sense. And that's really the end game here, is to look at it holistically. So if I'm looking at it holistically, because obviously I think people can get the fact that you can deploy a piece of technology to get an efficiency gain. We've been doing that since the early 21st century in increasing measure as then cloud software began to connect things together and SDKs gave into APIs, we get that whole play. Software creates efficiencies. But what I'm hearing you say is not to think of AI like a piece of software you implement, to think of AI as a way to elevate your model. Is that a good way to phrase it?
Absolutely. And I think it elevates your model in the services that you deliver, the outcomes that you are creating for your clients. It can change your culture and your talent pool tremendously, what the roles actually are needed. And of course, then that business model and how you price and, are painting the story of what you are delivering to clients and how. Because
Well,
these questions are coming up more and more about, well, if you're using AI and you're billing me by the hour, it didn't take you as long. So all
yeah,
of
the
that.
market's going to start actually putting pressure on that. And internally, you're going to end up. There's going to be internal pressure of the timesheet starts to decline. But even if not, the client's going to start putting the pressure. And so I like what you said. It was an interesting way you phrased it, that AI is collapsing time. And time is really just a measurement of effort. It's effort and attention. It's not a measurement of outcomes. And so if we were kind of broaden that, a little bit and use the effort word, AI is collapsing the effort. And that's a good thing, to have less effort to generate the outcomes of any business. But when we are charging for the effort, not the outcome, it's self-defeating. So when you said, elevate the service models, I hear a lot of people say that they are concerned in their role within a firm. They're not a partner. They're not in a position of leadership. That they're concerned that their job could be displaced by artificial intelligence. Are you hearing that same concern?
100%. I actually spoke with a leading tax vendor in the space last week, and he said they're having a lot of problems because there's like this political divide in the firms that they work with. Leadership is saying, don't talk to the team about these kinds of issues where, let's say a tax preparer, they implement this technology and all of a sudden 4 hours of their day is completely free. And the leadership is like, well, don't talk to them about that. They're going to get scared. And the practitioners are like, well, what do you want me to do with this other 4 hours? The leadership conundrum there is, or that they should be taking the opportunity, well, let's upskill them, right? And get them to do different types of work. So when you were talking about the effort piece and being, obviously tracked to time, and Ron Baker's the king of this, right? He's brilliant about all of this, has been preaching this for decades. But is that the effort, you still need to do effort. It's just in different ways. It's now shifted to the judgment, to the analysis, to checking what the agents are doing, and hopefully moving into, because advisory doesn't just need to be in CAS, like accounting. Advisory can be in tax, it can be in audit, it can be across multiple different practice areas, right? So upskilling them to become, more highly valued, outcome focused advisors across the practice.
Yeah. And with tax, you've got a corporate portfolio, which can kind of move over into financial planning and analysis. And you've got that
100%.
individual tax portfolio where you can upskill your folks to wealth management, certified financial planning. And of course, like you mentioned, tax analysis. But tax analysis is at the end of, that's not the ceiling. You can keep going up from there.
100%. And don't you think that's what the clients want?
That's what the clients want. Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
I
We're
mean,
giving them
I'm
what
not
they've
a
always
CPA.
wanted, what
I
they're
go
hungry
and
for.
hire a CPA to do this, and that's what I want from them, personally. So
Yeah. And so, there's this tagline under CPA, never underestimate the value. I think you all came up with that at the AI CPA, and it's a great tagline. It's just now we have the technology to deliver with consistency on the tagline. It's not just being clerks for the IRS. It's not just being bookkeepers and record keepers. Don't underestimate the value that a CPA can bring when they're liberated by the AI. But I really liked that word you used, upskilling. You've part of this strategy that you need to put in place, and maybe the strategy you're seeing firms do that you were celebrating earlier here, has a service model, but it also has a team upskilling model so they can reach up to those services, those elevated services. What are you seeing some of the firms do when they move from, say, record keeping and tax prep, and they move into client advisory services, which again,
Mhm.
CPA.com defined that with their 2.0 model. We follow
Mhm.
that here at Woodard. It's got those 5 components that you all laid out. Just very quickly for those listeners that don't know the 5 components, you've got transactional accounting, great term by the way, because I like it better than record keeping. Transactional accounting, you've got controllership services, back office process outsourcing, financial planning and analysis, and fractional CFO. You can do some or all of it. Some of our listeners might go, well, the CFO thing sounds a little bit outside my realm. A lot of standalone cash practices don't do CFO. That's okay, but at least do the FP&A, the financial planning analysis. So, Kacee, whenever you are seeing firms deploy that kind of a model with or without AI, what are you finding are the biggest opportunities for upskill, the biggest skills deficits, if you will, in the firm?
Well, most firms have the capabilities for predictive and prescriptive analytics at this point, but it's still very static in what they're looking at, and it's always backwards looking. So,
Mm,
getting them to that mindset shift of needing to be truly looking forward. And I think this is going to become more and more important as the tools are delivering insights directly to the clients before the CPA can even pick up the phone, right? So then this creates different client expectations. They start to ask, well, wait a minute, if this fintech solution has just sent to my email all these beautiful reports and to some degree even give them some analysis, what are you guys doing? So I think the upskilling there is all around A, the client communication, B, helping them to really understand what their numbers are telling them and giving them decision support. That's huge right now. It's not just about the outcomes that you deliver, but you need to be helping them to make those decisions. Um, and and then of course, you've got this big upskilling opportunity here of we're going to be future looking. We are
yep.
not going to just
Future
be
forward.
static.
Yeah.
Yes, 100%. We're not just going to be looking backwards for you and telling you what happened, maybe even some extra why, but rather where you're going and what you need to do.
Yep. And I think AI, kind of getting back to that, when we're talking about what it enables firms to become, uh, I've seen some emerging technologies. One of them just entered the accelerator program, Kintsugi, where they're using artificial intelligence to do nexus studies pretty much in real time at the push of a button, and that's lowering the fruit on the tree, and so firms can get more into regulatory compliance, which I would say is a controllership services offering, because they're now empowered with these kinds of tools. Um, where those without AI, Nexus studies were typically the realm of the top 200 size CPA firms, and some of
Yeah.
them even outsourced that. Now that can move down market. More people can do that kind of work. Are you seeing any other areas where maybe AI is lowering the fruit on the tree?
Oh gosh, it's such a good point. And when you were saying that, I was thinking back. It's got to be at least 3, maybe 4 years ago when I wrote a report that we published, and um, it was all about AI as the great equalizer, because so many of the tools and the resources that the big firms with deep pockets had now are becoming more and more readily available
Yes.
to smaller firms, right? I mean, even if it's not a purpose-built system in the profession that is there, small firms are vibe coding these products for themselves, right?
Yes.
But to answer your question, yes, I think that um, a lot of these tools are allowing people to get broader in what they do, but the ones that I see being really effective and being able to charge more, they're actually going all in and going deeper rather than wide.
Deeper than broader. Okay.
Yes, absolutely. And we saw this, gosh, what, a decade ago, where people were getting very specialized in niches and industries. Well, now I see them doing the same thing with services as well. We're going to go really deep in these types of services rather than just throwing a very wide net of, okay, we do
Mhm.
everything.
Yeah, and there's something to be said for that, being the expert, having the 10,000 hours, the reputation around a particular industry. We know that's extremely powerful, and not just an industry, but the way you analyze that industry. I
Yeah.
love watching, say, Marcus Lemonis and the way he manages your restaurants. Uh, or John Taffer on Bar Rescue. I mean, these folks are it's just fun to watch a micro expert kind of go at it. And we're seeing firms in the enterprise space like Aprio. They're not just limiting it to one industry, but they're creating CAS SKUs or CAS pods or whatever you want to call them, kind of CAS operations for each industry, which is a way to kind of go broad and narrow at the same time. But I think a small firm would go deep. They didn't have the benefit of broad and deep like a firm like Aprio.
Yeah. Then
Um,
I just think you can end up spreading yourself too thin.
yeah, unless again you're a top 50 firm like Aprio and you
Of
can
course.
afford to do that and maintain a separate set of expertise and websites and all those other things. They basically are a bunch of CAS practices under one roof. But yes, for a lot of the listeners in here, that pick your one swim lane and go with it on CAS.
And
One of the
even
areas I'm seeing AI enablement, Casey, is in spend management. There are, of course, a wide range of these tools that are out. Bill.com pioneered that space, and then it's kind of broadened out in the last few years. But even beyond the technology that facilitates the transactions, it's the way we can now analyze the spend, and we can look for places. AI will surface places where there are cost and expense overruns, anomalies on expenditures that could be errors or even embezzlement or fraud, where we would have to pour through so many samples of data to find that. It would have been cost prohibitive for the client. AI can read every single expense transaction over the last 13 months to pick up some of these annual recurring cycles and just spit out what it thinks you should take a hard look at. Um, and then we
and
can go back to the client and make recommendations. We can save you $10,000 if you'll just cut these expenses. It's pretty valuable.
Yeah, and it's even enforcing company T&E guidelines for staff, which is
Yes.
making the HR team's job a lot easier, right?
Yes, yes, that's exactly right. If you've got a suspend policy, you can now enforce it by analyzing the data at every single retail transaction, every single hotel counter, every
Absolutely.
single flight, and look for non-compliance.
Yes.
Um,
That
so
category has matured so quickly. It's impressive.
it's exploded, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has.
And I think some of that was market need, even apart from AI. But now that you get AI enablement in it, it's just fuel for the fire. All right, so we've seen that these firms are either being reactive or responsive. And I think you did have a third category over there, which was kind of the ostrich head in the sand. You didn't say that metaphor, but there was kind of the ignore it. I'm busy. I'm busy. I'll get to it when I get to it. Maybe I'll just sort of ride it out and retire before the wave hits. I'm seeing a little bit of that too. Just got to survive the next 2 to 3 years and I'll sell my practice. Um, I want to say to that group, I don't think you have 2 to 3 years. And if you want to sell your practice at a higher valuation, spend those 2 to 3 years deploying these technologies, right? But I'm hearing you loud and clear, Kacee. Your message, I think the one big takeaway to the audience is respond, don't ignore, but don't react. Be strategic.
100%. And I'll tell you a quick story. So 6 years ago, when COVID hit, I created, when I was at CPA.com, some slides because we had been pushing for a decade of three things like, hey, firms need to support distributed, not just workforces, but also clients, like just remove geographic boundaries. You need to be offering advisory services and you need to be in the cloud. And what COVID did was it forced all three of those things at once. And literally, like it's 6 years ago to the day, right? Um, You had to be in the cloud because you could no longer be at your desk with that computer, a brick and mortar building. You had to have distributed workforces as well as be able to support clients from everywhere. They weren't able to show up with shoebox full of receipts anymore. And you had to be an advisor because they were all in such a disparate state. They were terrified. They needed advice. They needed help with PPP applications. So all three of those things hit literally overnight.
Yes.
And what I truly believe is that AI is forcing us into an incredible opportunity for firms right now. And I call it an opportunity because this has been a transformation that's been needing to happen. One is that business model, the operating model shift. And two is truly becoming more outcome focused. Everybody's been talking about trusted advisors for God knows how long, like outcomes, decision support advisors that are truly high value. It only works though, Joe, if they're willing to rethink how they operate, how they price, how they staff, and how they're going to deliver to new evolving client expectations. So the firms that do all of that, I do believe will scale. The ones that don't, I think are going to feel it pretty quickly. Very similar to those that 6 years ago were like, oh crap, what do we do? How are we going to support this?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like the folks that were the latest adopters to the cloud really suffered. And I think the later adopters to AI are going to really suffer. And unlike the cloud, which was like a little over a decade in its bell curve adoption, AI is not going to have that long of a period. It's going to be measured in probably the next 2 to 3 years are going to be the crest of do or die, and you don't have the luxury of waiting and seeing here now. But I know that there's one elephant in the room we haven't pointed at yet, and that's the AI hype.
Mm-hmm.
And some of that's justified. I mean, that's the nature of Silicon Valley. If you're a developer, you're a little prophetic with your code. You talk about what your software is going to do, right? And then you come back and you backfill on that promise. Well, we got a little bit of that with the initial AI hype, right? And everybody wanted to kind of make their big press release, make their big announcement. And they were creating these conditions and laboratory experiments that worked under those conditions. And then we try to test them in the real world and they break. But how, Kacee, what is the sort of gulf right now between hype and reality? Is it closing? And second, how can our listeners tell the difference between the hype and the reality?
So funny, Joe. I just wrote a newsletter about this last week because it's incredibly frustrating. And I actually think that the hype sets us back because they're so overwhelmed. They've got information overload and it makes them just pause. They'll see, perfect example, that New York Times article that came out a few weeks ago that said, don't let AI do your taxes. It's terrible. It can't do the calculations. And most people didn't actually open it up and read the rest of the story. The context it is correct if you read it. They were using like Gemini and generalist GPTs, but they're talking about, Joe Schmo down the street. They're not talking about a CPA using a purpose-built agent that sits on top of or is built into their tax prep software. They're two very different things, but it all gets generalized together. So, and this is actually one of the main reasons that I started the foundation, was to help the profession and the broader ecosystem to just kind of start to decipher hype from real signal. So in that newsletter I just wrote, one of my biggest pet peeves is what you're talking about, is just not just the press releases. I understand I'm marketing is in my blood. I get why you have to do that. However, the inflated claims by all of the vendors. So what's happening, and I'm seeing, and this is one of my biggest pet peeves, is they will get a certain accuracy gain on a single client or business or workflow, and they'll use that as their main marketing jargon, and they'll say we get 99% accuracy on blah 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 blah, and or these huge efficiency gains, and they're not disclosing what their benchmark is or what the sample
Or
size
were the
of the data
conditions
is.
where that happened? Yes.
Exactly. And so that I think is creating and just, exploding all of this hype, which isn't actually helping. It's creating unrealistic expectations. And I think that they just it's fine. I'm sure that they did achieve that. But just because you achieve it on one customer or account doesn't mean that that is the benchmark and the average or the median that somebody should go into that implementation expecting right away.
Yep. So what I would encourage people to do is, first, I would say that everything that Kacee just said is dead on, and don't let the fact that there is hype create an excuse or a rationalization for you to delay experimentation and adoption. It's easy to just blow off the whole category and say, "Well, it's an overhyped category. It's not real. It's fake." And I think that's the easy way out. I think what you do is you if you want to really hear what Kacee's saying, I'm going to kind of summarize her thoughts here. It's have a plan, make that a multi-year plan, make it an elevation of the entire firm's model, then carefully adopt. And all careful adoption comes with testing, experimentation, control groups, then deployment, right? So that you're testing out that software for yourself. And then what Kacee just told us was, yes, GPTs are powerful, but the way that programmers are coding AI into and using AI within tax solutions and bookkeeping solutions and audit solutions, that's going to be the cleaner set of rails that you can ride on. Let them do that heavy lifting for you. Now, Kacee, that newsletter you referred to, I'm assuming it's out on your website. So this would be a really good time to talk about your organization. You founded the AI Native Accounting Foundation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm honored to be on your advisory board. Thank you for inviting me. And you're giving out a couple of awards here at Scaling New Heights coming up in June. Tell us about those.
Yeah. And thank you, Joe, for, being so gracious with your time and your insights on the advisory council. We couldn't do it without you, but, so the foundation is, kind of has 4 pillars. We've got education, which has our podcast is kind of the core of that. And then, we've got our newsletter and different things that we're going to be producing. We've got the awards, which these aren't fluff awards of just, some firm implemented a tool and there's AI in it. No, we've got 4 awards. There's 2 that are practitioner focused. One is recognizing training and excellence that they are leading. The second is in AI workflow implementation. Then we have 2 firm awards. I'm big on strategy and governance. So one is focused on that. And then the second is about a AI innovation that the firm has built and been able to implement. So they're very specific awards. And you've been so kind to let us recognize those award winners at Scaling New Heights. So we're excited about that. And then we will create case studies and dive into all 4 of those deeper so that the profession can learn from it and hopefully take some wisdom and nuggets from that, and then they can replicate it in their own firms. Third is scholarship. So we'll be opening later this year the applications for 2 scholarships. And then fourth is a research arm, our first research project that we're going pretty deep on this year. It is looking at, kind of similar to what we were just talking about with that New York Times article, about a dozen different workflows across 3 different practice areas. And we are comparing the model data of purpose-built systems made for the profession compared to if you did those same workflows in generalist GPT systems, OpenAI, Anthropic, Gemini, et cetera, and seeing what the true accuracy comparisons are. So that's our first research project.
That one's really cool. Yeah, yes. I think that's what a lot of people need to see more of.
So
all right, so folks, you can learn all about the foundation at ainativeaccounting.org. That link will also be in the listening guide at woodard.com/podcast. That newsletter article that Kacee referred to, you can find it out there and also in our listening guide. And if you're going to be at Scaling New Heights, which hopefully you all will be, you'll get to see Kacee on our main stage giving out these 4 awards, as well as recording an episode of her podcast live. Kacee, it's so great to have you with us. Thanks for sharing all your knowledge.
Oh, thank you, Joe, for having me. This was fun.